Welcome to another edition of the Street Peace Coalition. My name is John Muhammad. We're certainly glad to have you join us this evening to talk about the things that are going on in our streets. The most pressing thing that we have been discussing for the last couple of weeks is the increase in crime rate around the city of Chicago. It should be noted that the city of Chicago has experienced a 62% increase in homicides. That's up to 216 homicides this year, and that's counting through May. The thing that we really want to talk about and get some perspective on from our callers is why has this dramatic increase taken place in this city? What's going on in the city of Chicago that is contributing to these alarming rates of gun shootings and gun violence in communities across the city? We know that the mayor has appointed a new superintendent for the Chicago Police District, and we really hope him well in that capacity. But we really need to start being more proactive about the gun violence that we see in our neighborhoods, in our communities. The gun violence, as compared to other major cities across the country, is nearly astronomical. When we look at a city like New York gun violence is a fraction of the rate of the city of Chicago. And the city of Chicago is about the same size as Brooklyn, New York. What kind of conditions are contributing to this increase in shootings and homicides in the city? Is it merely the lack of economic opportunity? Is it the fact that the city in 2010 had its gun laws, its handgun laws struck down, which has increased the availability of guns across the city? Is that something that has contributed to the spike in gun crimes? So we'd like to hear from you this evening as to what you think or believe is taking place in the city of Chicago that has contributed to this significant increase in shootings and crime across the city. The carnage is like it has never been before. And we really need to try to wrap our minds around this to figure out what is taking place. One thing we know for sure is that a large amount of this gun violence is taking place by our young people. Our young people have, for one reason or another, devalued their own lives or undervalued their lives. And we need to be able to pull on our young people to have them understand that they are precious, not only in God's sight, but in the community sight and in their family sight. So we want to hear from you to find out, what do you think the causes of the increase in gun violence are? I think we have a caller. Go right ahead, caller.
Hello.
Yes. Welcome to the Street Peace Coalition. Do you have a comment?
I had an idea that could help the.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you, caller. Okay, I don't hear anything. Maybe we want to go to the next caller. But I just want to reemphasize the point that our communities are struggling right now, and we need to come up with a solution for this gun violence, or else we're going to keep hemorrhaging. You know, we should note that when we talk about street peace, the presence of peace requires the presence of justice, right? Because peace is not the absence of conflict. Peace is the presence of justice. And when we try to figure out what does justice look like in a community context, we have to talk about opportunities for educational advancement, cultural expression, social and recreational expression. All of those things lead to a higher quality of life and a better standard of living. If you take those two elements, a higher quality of life and an increased standard of living, that will contribute to a better environment where justice and peace can take place. So those are the kind of things that we need, that must be included in the equation when we talk about trying to reduce the violence and create peace on our street. I think we have another caller. Go right ahead, caller.
Okay, mine is a suggestion, a comment. I believe that there is a way to stop the violence in the city streets, and here it is. And back in the days, in the 60s and the 70s, for children that were brought up in certain households where the parents might not have been educated or may have been too young to give the children moral values, the kids would at least learn that at school. So a suggestion would be for all of these religious groups, whether you're a Muslim, Protestant, Baptist, what have you, make a long story short, if they come together with the mayor and the mayor interacts with the Chicago public school system and allow them to have a half an hour to their education curriculum where it would be called urban education, and therefore they could hear males and females talk to the students and basically give them some kind of morals and values that they're not getting in the home. And that way we would reach the youth, because the police are a deterrent, or they are an after effect when crime happens, but they cannot actually build and give children morals and values, because they're there basically when something has went wrong.
Right.
But that they have to learn in the houses, and if they're not getting in the homes, they can at least get it in the schools. And some of these teachers are not really caring. But if you had like a class where you had different ministers from different faiths in the African community schools to teach them about morals and values, just for half an hour, like a mentorship, then that way at least the child is not getting that in the house can actually get that in the school like they used to do in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah. So basically, what I hear you saying, caller, is that we really have to look at the value and the value system and how that gets imparted to our young people. That is quite true. But we just have to keep in mind that, this is not 1960 or 1970. This is 2016. They did a study about 40 years ago, and they looked at what were the 5 major things that influenced young people during that period of time. And when we're referring to the 60s and the 70s, right? And the study that they did found that there were 5 major things. Number 1, the home life or family. Number 2 was school. Number 3 was church. Number 4 were friends. And number 5 was television or media. They came back and they did the study 40 years later, and what they found was all of those things were almost turned on its head. Okay? The major influencing factor 40 years later on young people was number 1, friends. Right? Number 2 was media. Number 3 were their parents and their home life. Number 4 was church, right? Number 5 was church. Number 4 was school, right? So we get more of a picture of what is actually influencing our young people today, and primarily it's each other. It's other young people, right? They are the ones who are now influencing each other in 2016. And there's no other place where that is evident than on social media. That's a lot of, the place where young people are being socialized and they are imparting values to each other. But the caller did speak to school and the value of education, and how we have to begin to look at the educational opportunities that our young people have. I'm a firm believer that one of the things that we have to do is we have to begin to put anti-violence in the schools. Okay, we have to make that a part of the curriculum. If we assert that the violence that is being perpetrated on our streets is not only pernicious but is at epidemic proportion, then we need to start taking some very drastic measures to address this violence. So, anti-violence and particularly anti-gun violence need to be put in schools. And I'm just not talking about anti-violence, but also self-respect, respect for life. Those things need to be taught in the school system as well. I think we have another caller. Go right ahead, caller.
Hello.
Okay, caller.
I've, I've been listening. Am I on?
Yes, you are on, caller. What is your comment?
Okay. My comment is this: women of all races and colors in Chicago need to have a forum out in the public and say to their children, "Son, I don't know what you're doing out there, but don't be out there doing anything wrong."
Mm-hmm.
See, men always want to lead, but women have more power, and grandmothers have power over their grandchildren, especially sons, than men do. Because a man don't want to hear another man tell him what to do, but he'll listen to grandmother and granddad,
Yes.
my grandmother and mother.
Great comment, caller. Yeah. You know.
And see,
Mm-hmm.
they will listen. They need to hear a woman's voice say, "Son, don't do that. I don't know what you're doing out there, but don't do nothing out there wrong."
Mm-hmm.
And they will hear them from the mothers and the grandmothers' voices. Thank you.
Thank you for your call, caller. Yeah, there is definitely a role for women to play in trying to curb some of this violence that we see in our communities. Mothers and the lack of respect that young people have for their mothers really contribute to some of this that's taking place. But you know, it's the whole community. We see the depopulation of our black males in communities across this city, mainly because many of them are locked up in prison facilities and jails across the country. So we really have to begin to examine the proper role of mothers and fathers in the household. But mothers and fathers need support systems. It's difficult to raise children nowadays when you don't have the capacity and the economic support that you need to hold a family together, especially in communities that have been devastated, where young people are pulling on each other and they're pulling each other away from the family, and they're finding more camaraderie and brotherhood among each other on the street than they do in the home, right? Because young people, they look for friendships, relationships, they look for status, they want economic resources that can help them buy the things that they want to buy. And unfortunately, they begin to feed into the underground economy that's in our neighborhoods that often lead to a conflict with some other person that's trying to pursue the same thing that they're trying to pursue. And, you know, there was an article that was written this past weekend in the Sun-Times. Actually, I think it was the Tribune, that really looked at why is this increase in crime taking place. And I think there was a professor from the University of Illinois who was talking about how this phenomenon in Chicago is playing out. A lot of the conflicts that we see among our young people are not like the conflicts that we saw when we were coming up. More the conflicts are about personal insults, somebody shaming someone else, um, somebody feeling as though they were disrespected, and they wind up trying to settle their differences by shooting at one another or going on social media and ratcheting up the disagreement or the conflict. And then before you know it, there's a gun involved. And quite often, our young people may put their address or their location on social media as a dare. You know, I dare you to come around here and I got something for you. And before you know it, it spirals out of control. A lot of this is because of lack of emotional maturity and just not enough lap time, and not being able to really control their emotions, especially when there is a situation that becomes intense and becomes something that they haven't dealt with before. The first thing they run to is to try to get something that they think is going to resolve the problem. And, you know, if anyone out there is listening to the sound of my voice, I can tell you now that a gun does not ever solve a problem. Okay? Guns usually only create more problems. They create many more problems than they solve. If you think you had a problem before you got a gun, well, you get one and then you shoot it and you shoot someone else, and you'll find out how many problems you can have just by being reckless and using bad judgment, right? So we want to really have our young people try to develop alternative means to resolving their conflict. And this is especially true among gangs. The gang activity in different places around the city has increased, and they've broken down into cliques, and these cliques may have a beef with one another, not because of some kind of organizational dispute or some kind of problem that they have about turf area. It's usually some problem that they have with another person about, an attitude, a personal problem, or problem over personal relationships, fighting over each other's partners, female partners, that is, women and girl partners, girlfriend and boyfriend kind of conflict. So, the Chicago Police Department in our communities have our work cut out for us. And we really want to see that there is less violence over the course of this summer and a reduction in crime. And we can only get a reduction in crime if we have more responsible parents step up in the household, making sure that they know where their children are come 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night, right? And that they also have something constructive for their children to do over the summer months. There's nothing that stops a bullet like a job. I'll say that again. There is nothing that stops a bullet like a job. If you have a job, you got someplace to go, you have someplace to be at a certain hour, at a certain time, and you have to prepare yourself to go there, and you got to think about how you're going to get there the next day, and you're always planning to be responsible. Well, if you're planning to be responsible, then you don't have a lot of time to be irresponsible. Okay? So that's part of the equation right there, making sure that there's adequate employment opportunities for our young people so that they don't have any idle time to get in the kind of mischief that leads to fratricide and homicide in the city and in our neighborhoods. So that's one element. The other element is recreational activities, summer camps, summer jobs, recreational sports, those kind of things that occupy our young people and keep them focused on constructive engagement that they can release a lot of this pent up energy that they have during their teenage years, right? So that was one of the things that saved me, playing sports, and saved a lot of young black males my age. We got into baseball, football, basketball, those kind of things. Those constructive recreational outlets are things that our young people need to latch on to. We need to see more boxing gyms in the community. We need to see more baseball teams in the community. We need to see things that will redirect and refocus our young people's attention and make them to see that they have a future, and that future is worth investing in, and that they should never undervalue or devalue their own lives, because their lives are indeed precious. So, did I see another caller? No? Oh, okay. Well, we're going to continue right on and have you call in with any ideas or any suggestions that you have, or any reflections that you may have about why you think the crime rate has increased so dramatically in the city of Chicago in the last year. As I mentioned earlier, we had 216 homicides in this city through the month of May. 216. That's a 62% increase over last year. What is the cause of this increase? Is it because there are more guns on the street? Is it because of the change in gun laws? Is it because of the increase of unemployment and joblessness in our communities? What are the factors that are contributing to this spike that we see across the city? I mean, is there anything that noticeably that we can point to that has occurred this year that has not occurred in previous years? This is a serious question. And this is something that I'm sure that the city of Chicago and the police superintendent and the mayor and the deputy mayor are examining and trying to figure out what is taking place in this city at this time. Right? One of the things that we need to do as a community is we need to start going to our local CAPS meeting and our local beat meetings. And we need to put our heads together as community people and start to try to figure out what's happening in our neighborhoods. We do know that there is a large and growing heroin epidemic that's sweeping the nation. But from the early information that we've received about this epidemic, it's mostly hitting the suburbs, right? But that's not to say that you don't have some of that residual effect coming into inner city neighborhoods as well. I haven't seen any new information about the impact of heroin in our communities, but I'm quite sure it's there. If it's sweeping the countryside, you can better believe it's probably also hitting parts of the inner city as well. So we need to start looking at that too as a possible factor in what's taking place in our communities. So those of you who want to be involved with the Street Peace Coalition, we want you to hit us up on our Facebook page. Look us up, Street Peace Coalition. If you type that in on Facebook, you'll be certain to find us. You can also reach us at www.streetpeacecoalition.com. You can find us on our website. Feel free to leave a comment on our Facebook page. Inbox us. Also become a part of the coalition. We need to have men and women on the street helping us out when we engage in community engagement and in community action. We'll be letting you know in future programs where we will be having actions mainly on the south side and the west side of Chicago, trying to do something to quell a lot of this carnage that we see in our neighborhoods and in our communities. So we want to make sure that you know where to find us and how to get involved. Also, as I mentioned earlier, try to get involved with your local CAPS organization. Try to go to your local beat meetings and your district meetings. You can get a lot of information about what's going on your block, in your community, in your area by going to those meetings. You can also get a lot of information about the kind of crime that's taking place in your area on the Chicago Police Department's website. They actually have information that's usually kind of up to date as to what's going on in your neighborhood. Get involved, get active, and also join the Street Peace Coalition. We thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next week.